Greetings everybody. For this video I'm going to be demonstrating the sharpening features in the detail portion of the develop module in Lightroom. To begin with, whenever you guys are sharpening or applying noise reduction, again this video is just going to be on the sharpening portion of it, but when applying sharpening or noise reduction you want to be at a 1-to-1. Keep in mind that typically by default when you use your spacebar your image will zoom to a 1-to-1 unless you change it to one of the other options. So I'm going to get in here at a 1-to-1 and we're going to take a look at the four options that we have under the sharpening feature here. The first is the amount, and then the radius, detail, and then masking. As far as the amount goes, this is the amount of sharpening that you're going to apply to the image itself. So I'm actually going to zoom in here so we can see this a little bit better in the video. I'm also going to exaggerate the effects. I like doing this to show exactly what's happening here. So as far as the sharpening goes, you're allowed to go up to 150. 150 is quite a bit, and you're usually not going to go up that high, but you have the ability of going from 0 all the way up to 150. And also keep in mind, I didn't point this out, but the sharpening that we're actually dealing with here is what's referred to as capture sharpening. Um, so again, you could take this all the way up to 150, which I'm going to do for demonstration purposes. And I also want to point out that you can hold down the Option key and you can drag any of these sliders to get an idea of what's happening here. And what actually is happening here is that the sharpening is being applied to the luminance only, not to the color. So if there were stray color pixels, for example, and this were applying to color, we would start getting some funky effects. So that's really nice that it's only applying to the luminance. And luminance, of course, is the brightness of the image. So the radius itself, the radius is the next option. And the radius, if you think about a radius, and look at how perfect is this, you got a little circle here. And if you, going back to high school and even early days of college, your early math, you had the radius was half the distance of the diameter, right? So if we apply that in terms of pixels, the radius is the spread from an edge, because really that's what sharpening is. Sharpening is increasing the contrast. So if we have an edge here and we take the radius up, the radius is going to be how far it's going to spread. So you can see that sort of halo, what's referred to as a halo spreading. Now, what's nice about Lightroom is that as far as the radius goes, you max out at 3 pixels. So Photoshop, for example, allows you to go a lot higher to get some really crazy, wild effects. So again, I'm going to take this up to 3, keeping in mind, uh, once again, that you can hold down the Option key to take a look at what's happening in the black and white version of it. And next up, we have detail. Now, there's a way that I describe detail to make it easier for the students to understand is that it's kind of like if you're working in Photoshop and you duplicate your layer and you apply sharpening to the second layer, you can then control with your opacity slider how much of the sharpening you're applying. What's really happening here is that the detail is suppressing the halos. So it's not really completely removing the sharpening, but if I take the detail all the way down to 0, it appears as if I'm removing the sharpening, the 150 and the 3. Up here at the top of the detail option far to the far left-hand side, there's a little light switch to turn the option on and off, and this is with 0 detail. So you can see the before and after. So that's the before and this is the after. So you can see that there is a difference, and it's really not uh, working exactly like an opacity slider where it's taking it down to 0. But if I were to take this all the way up, now we can see the edges enhanced and we can see the detail enhanced as well. And that brings us to our last option, which is masking. Now, as far as the masking goes, if you think about, if you already have familiarity with Photoshop and you understand masking, the little saying that goes with it, that white reveals and black conceals, and that's not my saying, but white reveals and black conceals. By holding down the Option key, what happens is the entire screen turns white, which means that the sharpening from the amount, the radius, and the detail options are being applied to the whole photograph. So I'll zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And again, holding down the Option key and clicking on it, the screen goes white. White reveals. It's revealing the sharpening on the entire photograph. Now, while I'm still holding down the Option key, Alt on the PC, while you drag the slider to the right, black starts to come in. Black conceals. That's the saying in Photoshop. What black conceals means is that it's preventing or blocking the sharpening from applying to those particular areas. In this case, it's blocking out the sharpening on the sky, and if I take it all the way to the edge to 100, what we'll see is that the sharpening is now being applied only to the edges, which, if we're trying to sharpen an image, that's exactly where we want the sharpening to be. So you can sort of see the sharpening around the edges here, and then you see how it sort of fades out in the sky. So I'll bring the masking back down, and you can see that sort of noisy look coming back into the image. So of course, again, I exaggerated these, and you probably don't want to take your sliders that high for simple results until you guys get really good at this. If you jump on over to the presets on the left-hand side, under Lightroom General Presets, there are two presets for you, one for sharpening faces and one for sharpening scenics. So based on your image, if you don't have a portrait and you have what would be referred to more of a scenic with finer details, go ahead and choose the scenic option and it will apply sharpening for you automatically. And same thing if you have portraits, one click to sharpen your photos. The difference, if you take a look over here on the right hand side, sharpening faces has an amount of 35 and a radius of 1.4. The radius of 1.4 is key here because the higher the values go, they're for softer edges. So if you're thinking about skin, they're going to be typically softer than the edges in what would be considered a scenic. That would have finer details. So I'll click on the scenic option, and the radius now goes to 0.8 under the typical 1.0 setting that would normally be used. So the radius setting here, because it's lower, it's targeting more of the finer details, something that you'd probably want in a scenic or a landscape, for example, with a lot of detail in it. So that is how you use the sharpening options in Lightroom. Good luck, and I will catch you in the next video.